Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of ancient source material from the Mahabharata, specifically looking at the birth of the Pandavas. Now, if you think this is just some dusty, unrelatable myth, think again. At its very core, this is a highly relatable story of a high-stakes, blended family drama. I mean, we're talking about intense family rivalry, the ultimate fear of missing out, and some incredibly clever loopholes that completely flip the balance of power. It's just a prime example of how human emotions, things like jealousy and pure ambition, operate even when literal divine powers are in the mix.
Right, so to understand the conflict, we have to look at the immediate domestic situation. The king, Pandu, has two wives, Kunti and Madri. Kunti has this divine mantra that allows her to invoke celestial beings to have children, and she's already started building her family. Madri, on the other hand, perfectly establishes the intense feeling of inadequacy that's driving her plea when she says, "This, however, is my great grief, that while Kunti and I are equal, I should be childless." She acknowledges she doesn't really have any other complaints, but this glaring disparity in motherhood, it's just eating away at her. She's standing on the sidelines watching her co-wife build a literal legacy.
So, Part 1, a royal rivalry, the problem. Let's see exactly why this situation is so incredibly tricky for everyone involved.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the clear power dynamic it lays out. On one side, we have Kunti. By birth, she is of a superior station. She is already a mother, and crucially, she holds the absolute monopoly on this divine invocation power. Then on the other side, we have Madri. While she's considered an equal as a wife to Pandu, she openly admits she's inferior in social station to Kunti. She's childless and, frankly, completely desperate for offspring. Because Kunti is her direct rival, Madri admits she feels a certain delicacy in asking Kunti for a favor directly. It's just way too awkward and humiliating for her to beg her rival for the magic formula.
And that leads us to the concept of propitiation. Basically, the act of strategically gaining the favor of someone who holds power over you. Madri knows she absolutely can't go to Kunti, so she goes to the one person who can, their husband, Pandu. She asks Pandu to mediate and secure Kunti's favor on her behalf. So suddenly, Pandu becomes the reluctant man in the middle in this ancient domestic dispute. He actually admits to Madri that he'd been thinking about this exact issue, but he hesitated to bring it up because he just didn't know how she'd react. But now that Madri has laid her cards on the table, Pandu agrees to take on the rather daunting task of asking his first wife to share her most prized possession with his second wife.
Part 2. The Persuasion of Kunti, the pitch. Let's look at how Pandu actually manages to convince Kunti to share this exclusive power.
Pandu doesn't just go in and ask nicely. He methodically builds a three-step pitch designed to appeal to both Kunti's sense of duty and her ego. First up, he argues for the expansion of their race. He frames it as a benefit to the entire world, making it a grand, noble cause rather than, just doing a favor for Madri. Second, he brings in religious duty, arguing that more children mean more descendants to offer funeral cakes to their ancestors, ensuring their spiritual well-being. And third, and this is the kicker, he plays to her ego. He tells her that by doing this incredibly difficult thing, she's going to achieve undying, imperishable fame, directly comparing her potential sacrifice to the great sacrifices made by Indra, the king of the gods.
He wraps up this masterful pitch with this highly emotional plea. He says, "Therefore, O blameless one, rescue this Madri as by a raft, and achieve thou imperishable fame by making her a mother of children." The imagery here is just brilliant. He's painting Madri as someone literally drowning in sorrow, and Kunti as the heroic raft that can save her. And this emotional framing works flawlessly. Touched by her husband's words and the promise of imperishable fame, Kunti yields without any loss of time, and grants Madri the use of her celestial mantra.
But there's a catch. Part 3, Madri's clever loophole, the twist.
See, Kunti grants the wish, but she only grants it once. Madri's gets one single use of the invocation. So I want you to imagine you're in Madri's shoes for a second. You have exactly one chance to summon a deity to give you a child. Your rival, Kunti, already has multiple children and is way ahead of you. So how do you maximize a single wish? What loophole would you exploit to get the absolute most out of this one-time offer? The answer? 2. Madri doesn't just pick any random god. She very specifically chooses to invoke the Ashwins, who are twin gods. By invoking the twins, she exploits a massive loophole in Kunti's offer, essentially scoring a 2-for-1 deal out of her single invocation.
And Madri's loophole is a wild, immediate success. Coming to her with speed, the twin gods beget upon her 2 sons, Nakula and Sahadeva. The source text tells us they are totally unrivaled on Earth for personal beauty. In fact, the very moment they're born, an incorporeal voice announces that these twins will transcend even the energy and beauty of the twin Ashwins themselves. They're incredibly radiant, illuminating the whole region. So, with one swift, brilliant move, Madri has instantly leveled the playing field, going from 0 children to 2 spectacular divine twins.
Part 4. Kunti draws the line, the fallout. Because as you can probably guess, Kunti has some thoughts on being outsmarted.
So, the crucial point is that Kunti is completely done playing nice. When Pandu comes back a while later to ask for yet another favor on behalf of Madri, Kunti's reaction is hilariously human. You can just see her intense frustration boiling over here. She lists her grievances to her husband point blank. She reminds him she only gave the formula once, she flat out states she was deceived by Madri into giving her 2 sons, and her ultimate fear is finally spoken aloud. She's terrified that if she gives Madri the mantra again, Madri's going to find another loophole and actually surpass her in the total number of children. The rivalry is back, and it is hotter than ever.
Just look at this raw, unfiltered jealousy and regret in her own words. Kunti says, "This indeed is the way of all wicked women. Fool that I was, I did not know that by invoking the twin gods I could obtain at one birth twin children." I mean, you can practically hear her kicking herself. She isn't just mad at Madri. She is so mad at herself for not thinking of the twin god loophole first. She calls Madri wicked, sure, but underneath it all she is incredibly envious of the strategy.
And so, Kunti sets a very firm boundary. She tells Pandu, "I beseech thee, O king, do not command me any further. Let this be the boon granted by thee to me." She is flat out refusing to share the mantra again. She completely flips the script on her husband, essentially saying, "Look, if you want to grant me a favor, your favor to me will be to never ask me to do this for her again." The door is permanently closed. There will be absolutely no more shared mantras. Part 5. The growing epic, the aftermath. With the boundary set, the births conclude. But on this snow-capped mountain of 100 peaks, the story is really just beginning. Let's move to and see how this builds, because over the next 5 years, an embodied chronological timeline emerges. The text beautifully describes these 5 brothers as an embodied period of 5 years. They were born at intervals of 1 year after one another. First came Yudhishthira, then Bhimasena, then Arjuna, all to Kunti. Then, in years 4 and 5, Madri's twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, were born. Together, they represent this perfect, uninterrupted sequence of divine power coming into the world, step by step, year by year. And as they grew, it became abundantly clear they were anything but ordinary. The source notes they were begotten by celestials and endued with great strength. They were handsome like Soma, the moon god. They were proud as lions, possessing a leonine tread, broad breasts, courageous hearts, and immense prowess. They were well skilled in the use of the bow right from an early age. Watching them grow, the Rishis, the sages on the mountain, were absolutely filled with wonder. And King Pandu? He rejoiced exceedingly at his superabundant celestial children.
But here's the thing. They aren't the only children growing up in this royal family. And this brilliantly illustrates the coming tension. The text notes that all of them, the 5 Pandavas and their cousins, the 100 Kauravas, grew up rapidly together like a cluster of lotuses in a lake. But this stark visual contrast in numbers, 5 versus 100, plants the seeds of a massive, epic rivalry taking root. Which leaves us with this final, explosive thought. We've seen how a simple, relatable domestic dispute over childlessness led to the strategic invocation of gods. But looking ahead, what happens when 5 divinely powered brothers, born from competitive mothers and immense celestial energy, must eventually share a kingdom and a world with 100 rivals? This intimate family drama has literally just set the stage for one of the greatest conflicts in literary history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this provided a clear, fascinating look into the source text. Keep wondering and keep learning.